Once upon a time, an incredible event unfolded, one that turned a long-held dream into reality. My sister-in-law, Kayla, and I found ourselves the recipients of an astonishing gift. A jaw-dropping sum of around $750 million and control of our very own company. The excitement and disbelief we felt were beyond description. As we celebrated, the news of this unexpected windfall quickly spread among our colleagues. Kayla, bursting with excitement, became the center of attention with her infectious enthusiasm. Rumors began swirling around the office, with whispers attributing our sudden fortune to the generosity of our father. In her pride, Kayla made it clear that she preferred to keep things subtle, confidently stating, "I don't make a big fuss." However, the situation became even more interesting when my husband was also granted ownership of the company along with an additional $7 million. This revelation brought both surprise and amusement. One of the workers couldn't help but laugh, leaving my older brother and his confused wife completely speechless. Meanwhile, my brother was deeply engrossed in reading a legal document, looking pale and uneasy. His wife's reaction to the contents of the paper was quite dramatic. She let out a scream. "I'm Isabella, a 34-year-old who has been deeply involved in my father's business for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I watched my father build this company from the ground up, understanding all the hardships that came with it, especially during its early years when it was still small. Even though my parents had hoped I would go to college and carve out my own career path, my heart was always set on helping out in the family business. After graduating from high school, I decided to join the company, much to my parents' initial disappointment. However, I knew it was the right choice for me. Thomas, a seasoned and experienced employee who had been with my father for years, took me under his wing. He didn't treat me like the boss's daughter, but as an equal. He taught me valuable lessons about the business and helped me gain the skills I needed to contribute meaningfully. His mentorship was priceless, and I am forever grateful for the knowledge he passed down to me. My older brother, Paul, who is 3 years older than me, took a different path. He went to college, studying business management with the clear intention of taking over the company one day. He had always dreamed of being the future leader. His friends admired him, assuming he was destined for an easy life as the next boss of the family business. Sometimes, they would question him about whether there would be any rivalry between him and me, given our roles in the company. However, Paul always reassured them, saying I wasn't interested in wealth or luxury, and that I preferred to work quietly in the background. Paul was married to Kayla, a woman who loved the finer things in life. He indulged her desires, buying into the idea that living extravagantly would somehow boost his chances of becoming the boss. However, whenever Kayla and I met at family gatherings, she would often make sly comments, mocking me for not fitting the image of a typical boss's daughter. She seemed to take pleasure in pointing out how different I was from her lavish lifestyle, while I remained content with my simpler, quieter life. I firmly stated that material things didn't define my happiness. However, Kayla couldn't understand my perspective and pitted me, thinking I lacked the wisdom to manage wealth properly. My brother quickly joined in, agreeing with her point of view. He acknowledged that I was still learning the ropes in the company, and while I admitted I didn't have all the answers, my brother wasn't kind about it. He criticized me for not being confident enough, stressing that in business, projecting authority was essential to earn respect from others. Despite their criticism, I stood my ground. I calmly pointed out that in our family, only my father and I held real positions of authority within the company. My brother and Kayla's opinions didn't bother me too much because my mother stepped in to reassure me. She reminded me that I was making a positive difference in the company, and my father agreed, though my brother and Kayla were unmoved. They clearly didn't share our perspective and ended up distancing themselves from us for over a month. It was obvious that they were upset by our differences in opinion. During that difficult time, I reflected on the situation and told my parents, Paul and Kayla can say whatever they want. It didn't affect me much, especially as they continued living their extravagant lifestyle. They would dine at the fanciest restaurants and take lavish vacations, doing their best to maintain the illusion that Paul was the rightful heir and future president of the company. While they were busy with that, my father remained focused on expanding the business, pouring all his energy into making it grow. Then one evening, everything changed. My father started complaining about severe chest pain. Worried, I immediately urged him to rest and promised to call an ambulance. As he struggled, he pointed toward a drawer and whispered, "There's a letter for you in there. If anything happens to me, read it. The rest is for the lawyers." Tragically, before the ambulance could even arrive, my father lost consciousness and never woke up again. He passed away, leaving us devastated. At the time of his passing, my brother and Kayla were on yet another vacation. They didn't rush home immediately. They returned a couple of days later as though their delay didn't matter. At the funeral, my brother casually said, "We're relieved we made it back in time. Who would have thought Dad would pass away while we were on vacation?" His lack of concern stunned me. It was as if he didn't realize that my mother and I had been left to handle everything by ourselves while he and Kayla enjoyed their trip. Later, when I had a moment alone with him, I asked quietly, "Did you have a chance to come home earlier?" Without any hint of remorse, he replied, "I couldn't. Our flight was already booked." His attitude was cold and dismissive, showing no regret for not being there when our family needed him the most. Soon after, my brother addressed the employees of the company. Standing proudly, he declared, "Thank you all for your help. From now on, you can trust me to take over my father's position in a good way." Kayla chimed in, praising his dignity and expecting everyone to admire him. Their behavior arriving late, acting like nothing was wrong, and arrogantly assuming leadership left me frustrated and annoyed. It was clear that Paul and Kayla were more interested in appearances and maintaining their lifestyle than in truly stepping up for the family or the business. Their lack of empathy, along with my brother's arrogant attitude, made me realize just how disconnected they had become from the true values that built our company in the first place. As I guided everyone to the meal table during the ceremony, my brother continued to act overly proud. He began criticizing the food, questioning its quality as if nothing was ever good enough for him. Trying to calm him down, I reminded him, "Mom and I already discussed and approved this menu. Everything's fine." But I could feel his arrogance growing. I decided to stand my ground, saying, "I don't need you telling me what to do. This is exactly why people don't really understand what it means to be a true president." My brother's confidence in himself quickly turned into bossiness as he started ordering the employees around, including Thomas, a long-time and well-respected staff member. Seeing this, I stepped in. "Paul, don't be so bold," I cautioned. "They aren't just employees. You need to show some humility and treat them with respect." I hoped to make him see reason, but my words didn't seem to reach him. My brother responded arrogantly, "These guys should respect me more. I'm the president now." Kayla, standing by his side, quickly backed him up. "That's right, Isabella. Stop arguing with Paul. He's the president of the company now, and if you don't listen, he can fire you. He has that power," she said, clearly enjoying the authority they thought they had. While this heated exchange was going on and they were making a scene, a man suddenly approached us. "Sorry to interrupt," he said politely. "Your father asked me to handle the inheritance matters." It was the lawyer my father had hired before he passed away. I remembered my father mentioning this lawyer before, and I realized that he had carefully planned for this moment, thinking ahead about what would happen after he was gone. As soon as the lawyer started talking about the inheritance, both Paul and Kayla's faces lit up with excitement. They eagerly welcomed him, smiling broadly, ready to get things done quickly. Kayla especially seemed thrilled at the mention of money. "Isn't my father's inheritance worth $750 million? Paul asked, with tears welling up in his eyes. The amount sounded like a fortune, and Kayla was practically glowing with excitement. $750 million. That's so much money, she exclaimed. Owning a company with that much wealth is like living a dream. The employees who overheard this began whispering amongst themselves, clearly intrigued by the amount. Sensing the moment of importance, Kayla stood up proudly and announced, "Everyone, be quiet. This is the moment when the company and the $750 million officially pass to Paul." But just as she finished her proud declaration, one of the employees couldn't help but laugh. There was an awkward pause as my brother grabbed hold of the will and started reading it out loud, eager to confirm his new wealth. But as he read further, his expression changed. His face, once filled with pride, now turned pale with shock. Kayla, standing beside him, was confused as she watched his reaction. It didn't take long for the truth to hit him. According to the will, the entire company, everything my father had worked so hard for, was to be passed down to the oldest daughter. Me, Isabella. My brother stared at the paper in disbelief. He was silent at first, but then he began shouting, "This can't be true. This has to be a mistake." In a calm, serious tone, the lawyer stepped in, saying, "This is a legally valid will. There is no mistake." My brother's voice grew tight and strained as he tried to process the shocking reality that everything had gone to me, not him. "I don't care about this," my brother shouted, his frustration clear. "How can Isabella be the president instead of me? Maybe Dad was just getting old and confused." The lawyer, trying to stay neutral, added, "It's possible your father's judgment wasn't entirely clear. A will made by someone who isn't thinking straight might not hold up in court." Hearing this made my heart ache. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't let my brother and Kayla insult our father, a man who had always been fair and thoughtful. Even though they were family, I couldn't allow them to tear down his good name like this. The idea of my brother becoming president seemed completely unthinkable to me. He had never shown the dedication or commitment required to lead the company. My words seemed to enrage him even more. "What are you saying? Are you implying I'm not good enough to be president?" he demanded, his voice rising. Without hesitation, I replied, "You're right. How can you lead a company when you've never really contributed to it? You haven't put in the effort. You don't understand what it takes." "Don't be ridiculous," my brother shot back angrily. "Kayla and I even built a huge house fit for president. We went to great lengths to make me look like the future leader." I couldn't help but respond. "By building a mansion? By spending money on fancy restaurants? That's not how you lead, and it certainly doesn't help the company's image. Sure, money is important, but it's not everything. And let's not forget Dad paid for most of that house and your extravagant lifestyle." Paul's face flushed with anger. "How would you know all that?" I explained. "Before he passed away, Dad left me a letter. In that letter, he outlined everything, how much he had spent on you and Kayla, and that it would count as your gift during his lifetime. So, according to the will, your share of the inheritance is practically nothing." Kayla's eyes widened with shock as she realized what this meant. "Wait a minute, are you saying that the $750 million inheritance has already been spent? That doesn't seem fair if we're getting so little from it." One of the employees, the same one who had laughed earlier, decided to step in at this moment. "Excuse me," he said to Kayla, "but the $750 million you're talking about isn't personal money. It came from the company's funds, and I think all of us employees are well aware of that." Kayla looked even more confused. "So, can money from the company be inherited?" she asked, sounding a bit panicked. I looked at her directly and answered, "No, it can't. Company money is meant to keep the business running, not for family members to inherit. Your share of the inheritance is minimal because most of the money you've been enjoying came from the company's accounts, not personal wealth." Kayla's face fell as the realization sank in. "That's really disappointing," she said quietly, clearly upset by the revelation. I was just as shocked by the inheritance as everyone else. $750 million, it was a staggering amount. As the reality of it sank in, my brother suddenly stood up, as if a new thought had struck him, and he shouted at the employees, "Do you really want someone as plain as Isabella to be your president? I'm the one who's more qualified. I have the same kind of charisma that our father had." But to his surprise, none of the employees agreed with him. Thomas, a longtime staff member who had known my father for years, stepped forward and calmly responded to my brother. "Your father was indeed a charismatic man who built this company from the ground up, but you and he are not the same. What you're showing isn't charisma, it's arrogance." My brother's face flushed with anger as Thomas's words hit him hard. "How can you say that? I'm just as much a part of this company as Isabella, Paul protested. But Thomas, remaining composed, pointed out, Paul, you might be part of the company, but we rarely ever see you actually working here. You don't spend time understanding how things work. Frustrated, my brother shot back, that's because I don't have time for the regular work. I'm busy networking and making connections with important people. I don't have time for tasks that anyone can do. Thomas shook his head and continued, networking isn't everything. Isabella works diligently every day, handling her responsibilities and making sure she understands the business inside and out. She does it all quietly behind the scenes, just like your father used to. I see the same dedication and sincerity in Isabella that I saw in your father. That's why I believe she is the right person for the job. His words struck a chord with everyone present. The employees began nodding in agreement, clearly touched by Thomas's honest assessment. Feeling supported and moved by their trust in me, I spoke up. Thank you all so much. Honestly, I'm just as surprised as anyone by this sudden news. But having seen my father's hard work and dedication over the years, I care about this company just as much as he did and just as much as all of you do. I'll need your continued help to keep it going strong. The room erupted in warm applause, and I bowed deeply, grateful for their support. With newfound confidence, I added firmly, every one of you here is an important part of this company. You've all contributed to its success, and anyone who ignores your efforts is not fit to be an employee, let alone the president. And yes, even the president can be fired if they're not doing their job. My brother's face turned red with frustration. What are you even saying? I'm your brother, he shouted, clearly irritated by my words. I looked at him steadily and replied, I mean exactly what I said. You even mentioned earlier that if you became president, you might fire me. Paul was furious. How can you say this? I'm family, he exclaimed, unable to believe what was happening. But I stayed firm. Family or not, I can't keep someone on the payroll if they're not doing their job. That includes you. This is ridiculous, my brother yelled, looking around the room in desperation, hoping for someone to back him up. But the employees, who had once been loyal to our father, simply stared back at him with cold, unsupportive expressions. It was clear he had no allies left. Realizing he was alone, my brother and Kayla left the room, their heads hanging low. After that day, Paul lost his position at the company. He had to rely on the small inheritance he received, but it wasn't long before the money ran out. Soon, he came to me, asking for a loan to help him get by. Disappointed by his lack of effort and unwillingness to change even after losing his job, I knew that continuing to support him wasn't the answer. Paul had never taken the opportunity to prove himself, and now, despite everything, he still refused to take responsibility for his own actions. I firmly told my mother that we shouldn't give Paul any more money. His situation was worsening, and his friends, who once supported him when they thought he'd become president, abandoned him as soon as they found out he had lost the position to me, his sister. Kayla, who had once proudly thought of herself as the wife of the future company president, suddenly found herself in a difficult situation too. In an effort to stay afloat, Paul and Kayla made the tough decision to sell their large mansion. The money from the sale helped them sustain their extravagant lifestyle for a while, but without any steady income, their savings quickly ran out. As time passed, they found themselves with nothing left to sell and no way to cover their living expenses. When they tried to find work, they struggled because neither of them had the necessary experience. Paul eventually managed to secure a part-time job at a convenience store, a position far beneath what he was used to. It was a hard adjustment, and he often faced criticism from younger employees who had more experience in that type of work than he did. For someone who once believed he was destined to lead a company, it was a humbling and challenging experience. Kayla's life also changed drastically. She could no longer stay at home as a full-time housewife. With no other option, she joined a group of part-time housewives and took a job as a cashier at a local supermarket. She worked long hours from morning until night, earning a modest salary each month, far less than the life of luxury she had once enjoyed. Meanwhile, I focused on the lessons I had learned while working quietly behind the scenes at the company. I applied those lessons to help the business grow and thrive. With Thomas's help and the support of the other employees, we worked together and led the company towards steady growth. Ironically, my brother's downfall seemed to bring the employees closer together, strengthening the unity within the company. I made a promise to myself and to my mother that we would continue to expand the business. Our shared goal was not only to keep the company successful, but also to bring joy and honor to my father, who is no longer with us. We wanted to make him proud, knowing that everything we did was building on the legacy he had worked so hard to create. Though Paul's life had taken a difficult turn, and he and Kayla struggled to adapt to their new reality, I remained focused on the future. With my mother by my side and the support of our loyal employees, I was determined to lead the company toward even greater success, honoring my father's memory every step of the way.